Hello. Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Rankar. We have the full staff here on the show for our Tuesday edition of BWI Live. Nate Bauer, Sean Fitz here with me. We're going to get up to our normal shenanigans talking about Penn State football. We are doing a full preview this July of the Penn State football season. And by full preview, I mean we're doing it for the full month, not necessarily we're going to be previewing Nevada. I don't know that that's necessarily on the schedule for this month, but we're talking more about the schedule. Speaking of, some things coming up on that particular conversation. Is it good that Penn State's playing Ohio State in November? What's the situation? How would you handle the first month of the season? I'm going to be asking our experts that. And of course, more conversation about the Ducks and the whiteout. That's on the show today, plus Fitz's recruiting update, and the conversation about the conversation continues with Nate. So I will stop blabbing, and I'll introduce our guests for today's show. Nate Bauer, esteemed reporter for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Nate, how was your 4th of July weekend? Did you get some downtime, or were the kids just running around the whole time?
They came back for the 4th, and then it's a lot of work, but it was good. It's fine. T-Frank, I'm a little upset that we're not talking about the useless Prime Day purchases that I've already got in the books today.
So here's the problem: is I don't have a Prime subscription, so it's like so
smart.
It's so fully outside of my viewfinder that I didn't know. When? Not that I'm wanting to give free promotion to Amazon Prime, but when are Prime days?
I think it's today. Well, I know it's today for sure. It might be tomorrow. Listen, the point is, I bought $70 worth of mosquito repellent, and I feel really good about it.
Now that's a worthwhile investment. That's like you're going to Costco and you're getting it in bulk. Fitz, happy Prime Day to you. Apparently, I missed that one.
Nate? Is this the reason Penn State basketball got to commit? Because it's Prime Day? You got a discount or something like that?
Whoa!
Sorry,
Tip your bartenders and waitresses.
I've got some here all week. I got some loaded up. So, no, I mean it's good to be back. Didn't take a week off, but I was off the last couple of weeks. So I got some ones in the chamber here.
Yeah, I got some pent up energy there. Let's just start speaking of things that I don't have any sort of perspective or viewfinder on. Gavin McKenna commits to Penn State. Number 1 hockey recruit, a projected number 1 overall draft pick in the NHL draft. Nate, I know that you are a hockey expert.
Oh yeah.
But this is a conversation, obviously, that spans larger than just hockey, which is what we do here on the show. That news is those are the facts. I just read them out to you. But this is not in an this is in an ecosystem where NIL has changed, and Penn State's opportunity feels like there's a window here for the hockey team. So I guess what's your view of the dynamics behind the scenes from NIL and Penn State's approach to that with the $20 million or $20.5 million, whatever it is, from the ability to pay directly players now that Penn State has?
Yeah, I mean the most uncynical read of it is that it eats into football's budget or basketball's. What happened, right? I mean, the whole notion of the 20.5 being adhered to, I think is very much up for debate, and something that you're starting to see. It's trickling out, right? That every program in college football is complaining about every other college football program, right? Like it's they're all tattling on each other, as they should, because nobody's following the rules. But that's neither here nor there. What the point is Gavin McKenna is not free. He's not. I understand there are portions of the audience that would love it for the storyline, the narrative to just be, he just wants a great education.
And he loves Penn State. It's only for his love of the university, which just immediately connects to you, the individual. Yeah.
But it's not. And so, there's money involved, and with a talent of his heights, right? It's not nothing. And so that's another purse string for Pat Kraft and his staff to figure out how it all balances together. But I do think it is, worth reflecting. Like, I think it's a good point that you bring up. Like, these are the same stuff that existed with Sandy Barber, that existed with Tim Curley, Dave Joyner briefly, exists now with Pat Kraft, which is, how do you balance the needs of the heights of competition for football, right, with these behemoth programs that are spending a ton of money? How do you balance football's needs with the school pride, the fact that Penn State loves having champions in these other sports, right? Like Penn State loves having a great women's volleyball program, a great men's ice hockey program, great wrestling program. All of those things cost money. And when it's coming, like, yeah, there are elements of this, of individual donors that reach out and pick up some of the tab on some of those costs. But for the most part, you're still talking about money that could be spent elsewhere that is being spent on these things.
Open question here that I just have. I have to say it out loud. Is there a conflict of interest with the Buffalo Sabres in any of this? I mean, theoretically, it could be a farm team for Terry Pegula. Obviously, there's a draft and all those things. Just a dumb thought I had. Second,
who cares? No, you're doing it wrong, T. Frank. That's not how this works. If it is a farm team, fine.
Sorry, my ethics got in the way. I don't know, fairness and nonsense like that. Totally lost my second thought there. So Fitz, save me here. How are things going on your end of the world? What do you think of the situation here?
Well, that's not going to help.
Totally poof out the side of my head. That doesn't happen a whole lot anymore.
It's interesting when you break down the 20 million, and that's sort of your war chest that you base everything off of, and you've got other avenues of input, from all over the place. You mentioned Terry Pegula, but keeping those things afloat, because Penn State's football roster can supersede 20 million, and what happens to the rest of it? I mean, it's not all coming from that war chest there. So I keep going back to, and it's kind of like our subscription model here at Blue White Illustrated, is you ask people why they're subscribed. And actually Steven does it in the chat. He says, I'm still football. Hockey is great. But I'm still here for football. And that's kind of what Penn State's been all about, right? I mean, we've got people that love Nate's basketball coverage, that love the hockey, and Greg does a great job covering wrestling and all that kind of stuff, but it keeps coming back around to football, right? And there's a reason for that, because that is the center of the universe here. And that's kind of how this all goes. So when you're talking about breaking down that 20 million, it's not all going to go to football, but most of it is. So, I mean, you're looking at a situation where it's kind of mirroring what we view from our little telescope here to the greater scheme of what Penn State does. So that's kind of how you see that broken down. The trick there, and this is a big trick and goes well beyond the zeros that we get on our paycheck, is where does that extra stuff come from, and how can you supplement it? And you've seen, and I know I haven't been on the show very recently, but you've seen in the last month and a half with football recruiting, is where those extra zeros come into play, and that's the top of your board. And that's kind of what we're thinking here when we get back into recruiting, when we get back into prepping for the season for a team that's a top 4, top 3. Some people even have them number 1. Like there's a really good football team here, but it just seems so disconnected with how things are working, just because of the economics of it and because of where Penn State stands in the investment side of things. It's not a situation where, I don't tell anybody how to spend their money, but it's tough to look at the success on the field and it not align with how things work, on the transactional issue of it in the offseason. And here's the thing. It's not just Penn State. There's a thread on the Ohio State board right now that was like, I thought that a national championship was supposed to give us a recruiting bump, and now it's not.
Right. Why wouldn't Luke Wafel want to just choose Ohio State over USC? Because they just won a national championship, but all the other things. So Fitz, this is actually a question. This is what I was going to ask Nate, and I remembered it finally. I'm going to let's take the venture capital view of this, or a business view of this. Are there diminishing returns to investment in football? And by that, I mean, does winning a national championship actually bring you more money, more bottom line in football? Or is there just like a baseline of what you're going to get, and then it's all prestige and desire and kind of the reason for existence is to win? I wonder, if you're spending so much money in an escalating world, it feels like that's unsustainable. But is it worth the actual investment to win a national championship on the back end? I don't know if you can answer that, but what's your best thought about that thread?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's definitely things that come along with it. The marketing, the sell rate. You've seen, enrollment go up when teams are good. Like people want to be around winners, and that's for sure. And that hasn't changed with the new environment. I mean, you look at what Notre Dame got out of their run through the playoffs last year, and they didn't have to split it with anybody, and that's a big deal. Like that is, I don't want to say the main reason that they would stay independent, but that's a heck of a bargaining chip right there, is to keep all the money for yourselves. And you've seen Notre Dame be successful and probably spend more than I think, Notre Dame fans and Penn State fans probably in the same boat in terms of they want to win on tradition, win on the things that are great and that Nate laid out for Gavin McKenna, the glory of Old State and all this kind of stuff. But, when you have that kind of money and you are willing to get into it, yeah, it does. I think it does make a difference. Now, I'm not sure like the exact value of a national championship. Is it greater than your, what they say last year for Ohio State went up to 50 million or whatever those numbers were. I mean, I don't know that supersedes that, but at the same time, you're playing with a couple different lines of math here, and the revenue sharing will help. And it's always been, I think, part of the equation, but that part of the equation went back into the operation instead of going back into the people that made it happen.
Yeah. A couple things here. We're going to transition into the next part of the show. I just wanted to say out loud for everybody here, I know that a lot of us have been following the situation with the flooding in Texas. We're all thinking about those people and hope for the best in those situations of whatever that may be. However you want to phrase that, thoughts and prayers, thinking about those people. We were aware of that situation. Don't know what we can do about it from this perspective, but just wanted to mention, obviously, the devastation going on in that particular part of the country. Awkward transition, because there's no other way to get out of something like that, which is, hey, if you're here, check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Join us for $1. We're going to be getting into some of our premium content here in just a second. And we're only going to kind of get to the surface level because we only have 60 minutes, and we're already a quarter of the way through on this particular show, which is crazy to think. So, get the full conversation and get a deeper dive into that with us on the message board, where you can talk to us 24/7, day or night. Maybe I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and I check out the message board and you want to ask me a question. You can do that. I'll respond, and, we'll have a conversation there as well. So the conversation here, a little bit with the message board, with the live chat, always goes on the message board. And of course, if you didn't already, please subscribe here to the YouTube channel, like this particular video. Groggy start post 4th of July for the chat, but we got some people here. Stephen Changaris is always here from NEPA. He says hello. Frack the Hunter is here. Corrigan family says, I'm ready for analysis and mixed metaphors. I will deliver as best I can, but as always, I'm not going to force it, because then it's even worse. Not only is it bad, but then it's forced. So we'll see if any of those come up today. But I appreciate people that have been here and get the joke. So if you don't, you should keep watching. And one of those will just fumble out of my mouth and we'll have a good time with it. Speaking of a good time, Fitz, Antifragile. I know it's a lifeline during a hot summer like we've had here in July. So when's the last time you got down there? And tell everybody about Antifragile Brewing Company in State College.
Yeah, it was a week or two ago. I met Nate down there and another friend, and we reminisced, and we hadn't caught up with this other friend for a while, so it was great to see him. I know he listens sometimes. Probably he's too busy to listen this week, but no, I mean, it's a wonderful spot to just go down and chill. This was, I believe, a Friday afternoon after a round of golf, which is, Nate, that's kind of where we end up. We always end up. Though cutting back on the cheesesteaks, I'm not, because they're delicious. So it's always good to go down there, see the people, talk to the bartenders, talk to the owners. They're often around there. So if you do run into those people, tell them that the Blue White Illustrated podcast sent you. I know that they've been wonderful supporters of us, and hopefully we're wonderful supporters of them. Great day, or a great way to jump out of the hot summer sun and jump into the air conditioning there. Grab a beer. What's on tap right now? I don't know, but I know it's going to be good, because I go in there. Several Pilsners, several Hazies. I know there's some dark beer. I ran into a guy yesterday buying a dozen porters. Man, that's some
for the summer.
During the summer, man. He was we were in Wegmans, and I looked down. He's got 12 porters, and I'm like, that is some dedication, man. He's like, they're not all for tonight. I said, well, that's nice. But no, I mean, you're looking at the best beer in State College there. Wonderful people, wonderful atmosphere. Also, mixed drinks, kombucha, cheesesteaks. They've got it all. So definitely check it out if you're in town this weekend or anytime this summer in State College. It's Arts Fest this week, so they will be out. They will be around. They're very active in the community as well. So stop by, grab a drink, and have a good time.
Yeah, and they're one of the main sponsors for Happy Valley Brewers Fest, which is coming up next weekend as well. So if you want to check them out there, you can do that. They're going to be, like as Fitz just said, they're going to be very busy over the next couple of weeks, being out and about in the community. And that Happy Valley Brewers Fest coming up on July 19th. So you can check them out there as well. Tickets on sale right now, general admission, VIPs. I love a good VIP experience. I know Nate likes a good VIP experience, but I'm sure you're getting the deal that you want on that, though.
Nate's life is a VIP experience.
That's exactly right. Can I just? I will throw this bone to Happy Valley Brewers Fest, and this is certainly nothing against Arts Fest. Local knowledge is that the weekend after Arts Fest, best weekend of the year at State College.
Yeah,
eternally, especially if you're here for Arts Fest and experience bar lines. If you're into those kinds of things, it's not there the next week, and it's great. So
yeah,
Brewfest is a great thing to check out.
If you go to any of these events, whether it's next weekend, this weekend, you see Antifragile, you see some of our friends from the Happy Valley Brewers Fest, make sure you mention that you heard about it here on the BWI Live Show. Nate, you're coming up here. It's your time to shine.
No.
Nate had a conversation with a bunch of people, and then I'm going to ask him about that. So we call this the conversation about the conversation.
The conversation. About the conversation.
One moment. Hold on. Oh, of course. Here we go.
So red. Ugh.
Now we have our artsy lighting, actors on actors, conversation on conversation about Nate's conversation with Swole Drew Allar. That was the theme of Nate's latest conversation with the important people in the Penn State football building, including all of the coordinators and James Franklin and Drew Allar. So, Nate, was this a really big deal to Drew? Because this has been a main theme of conversation. Andy Kolnicki mentioned it during his press conference at the beginning of June. I know it's the feature in your latest article. So I guess I'm trying to gauge everyone's in the best shape of their life at this time, heading into training camp perpetually in football versus this is a genuine thing. This was an intentional thing for Drew Allar to get into exceptional shape. So what was your takeaway from that particular thread of the conversation?
Yeah, to be honest with you, the lead has been buried thoroughly in that he alluded to, without saying it outright, he missed a lot of time last offseason being hurt.
Mm-hmm. That is important.
Like, not saying that it was debilitating and that he couldn't do anything, but he's like, yeah, it's different having a full offseason. All the stuff that James Franklin has talked about with Katron Allen, right? For Katron, it's more pronounced because this is, literally the first time that he's been at Penn State that he's had a full offseason. In Drew's case, it's not every offseason, but last offseason, he wanted to make strides that, it's that eternal conversation, T. Frank, that we've had about it's opportunity for progress lost. Yeah. Right. You're just kind of stagnant when whatever it is, right? Foot, leg, arm, what have you, is a little dinged up. You just can't make that progress in those areas. So I do think that he has refined and narrowed his concentration on just really like all the little stuff, right? He was talking, and I think he's kept it at a comfortable, healthy space where he's not obsessing on it, but
right.
Carb intake and protein and
timing of your macronutrients. If you get deep into all of these different sciences in the sports science, when it comes to it, can get like obsessive of when you take your protein before, after, having caffeine and all those things to make sure that you get the most out of your lift and all that stuff. Sleep, I know, is a huge thing for Penn State football when it comes to development of these players. So you mentioned, how would you describe the importance to the on-field part of this? And Fitz, I want you to get you in here in just a second in terms of when I've been observing this conversation, my immediate reaction goes to, oh, Drew's going to run more this year. But is this just a natural progression, Nate, to his development as a football player? Or is it maybe a hidden level of schematic change in the offense?
I think he got bigger for last year, right? That was kind of part of the deal, was bulking up last year. And I think that there were ramifications that they realized were not necessarily completely conducive to the type of player he needs to be or wants to be. And so they refined it, right? I mean, it's all give and take, right? Yeah. It's okay. You need to be a little bit of a battering ram in the Big Ten, right? And everybody knows this, right? It is hard to get through a whole season of Big Ten football intact, even if you're built the way that Drew is. But I do think the words he used were mobility and flexibility, right? That should lend a little bit of insight, right? We're not talking about him, and he wasn't talking about himself getting his 40 time down, right? I'm not sure that that's really what's at stake here. I think it's more, like I said, just having done that last year and seen some of what came of it, just a refinement to that process and who, and I mean, and the funniest part to me is, right, he specifically said, he's like, I was at 238 last year and wants to lose some weight this year, and now he's down to 235. And it's like, well, 3 pounds doesn't seem that much, but
muscle weighs more than fat. So, body transformation, the weight on the, and it's funny because even athletes talk about their overall weight when really it's the composition that matters the most. Sorry, nerding out about all these things.
Do it. Say it.
So that's it. I did. That was the depth of my knowledge intention. Like, I'll go ask my expert when she gets home later today about what all of that matters. But Fitz, here's he's a pocket passer. Drew Allar is a pocket passer. So the need to be more athletic is not necessarily tied to his production. So I guess from your perspective, taking all that information, what Nate has been discussing, how do you view the improvements manifesting themselves on the field?
Well, I first off, and I shouldn't do this live because there's no way of checking myself, but I think there was another year in there. Like the sophomore year was the year that he kind of bulked up, and last year it was the agility year. Like, because that was the word James kept using, was agility, to get him to move around a little bit better. And I think it was noticeable in terms of, and I know he missed a good bit of the offseason. I believe it was a foot. He missed a good bit of the offseason, early summer, late spring, I think it was. So you're looking at a situation where, that all that kind of stuff manifests into, not getting to where you need to be, but he still got enough accomplished last year. This year, I think it's continuing on that agility path because he's a different quarterback. And you say he's a pocket passer. No, that doesn't exist anymore. He's a quarterback.
Yes.
The position has changed as such where if you can't move, you're toast, man. You are absolutely toast. So, I hope we get to see him run a 40-yard dash in Beaver Stadium at some point, but you're not banking on that. You're talking about getting, 6 to 10 yards, and that makes a big difference, especially when you're trying to, for instance, run out of clock in a bowl game or a playoff game or something like that. So I think that's really what you're looking at, is continue the agility, continue the ability to make the decisions and follow them up with your body. Like, I think he's okay with making his decisions, but also, following through. There's a difference there. Like, there's I've got great intentions of making great decisions, but following up with those things don't always happen. If you can do that and be agile, and Drew's what, a 4.9 guy, 4.8, 4.9 guy, somewhere in there, like, that's fast enough. Absolutely. But it's not about running in a straight line. It's like receivers. It's like corners. It's like, yes, you can be a 4.3 guy, but also have the hips of Nate, and it's going to be a problem. So I had to get I haven't been around much, buddy. I'm sorry. I had to get that one in there. So like that's what I'm looking at with Drew, is to continue that path of agility that he showed progress up for last year. And I think that, again, going back to not having Bo Prabula can be a very good thing, Like, I think it can be a very good thing in terms of continuity, in
Yep.
terms of having him in there to do these little things. And they're going to ask more of him. And T. Frank, you must have written about this because you're holding up your hands, but they're going to ask more of him. And I think he'll be receptive to being able to do it.
I just think this is a common theme about the offense last year is that he was on the field for all of those plays. They refused to take the quarterback and the leader off of the field. I think that's the correct decision. But then it creates this disjointed offense. And again, the point of a wildcat offense or a mobile quarterback is that it levels the numbers game against the defense. But if you have two quarterbacks out there, virtually what you've done is given back a number to the defense. So if the quarterback is more of a running threat, in whatever sense that means, even against certain coverages, like there are certain coverages you simply cannot play against an athletic quarterback or just a quarterback that is known to scramble and get yards. You cannot play cover 2 man on third down if you play a guy that is willing to break the pocket and get yards. Sean Clifford was awesome at cover 1 and run, where everyone's back is to him. There's maybe a quarterback spy, maybe there's a lurker in the middle of the field, and he can outrun that guy for 10 yards. Drew Allar last year was really good at getting first downs. Now it's about if he averages 7.5 yards on a scramble, what if he gets 10? And every single time he runs, he gets a first down. That changes the coverages you can play. So I think that all these things interconnect from the option game to the scrambling game. And it's interesting that it's been the part of the conversation when the way the season ended and what everyone's focused on is the passing game. And it's focused on the receivers and his play from the pocket, his mind, his footwork, etc. And the main change that everyone's talking about is Drew Allar, the athlete. And I do think there are implications for the passing game built into this conversation as well. So Nate, that's the next question here is this particular article, which you can go read at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Once again, I'm going to throw this up here on the screen for everyone watching. For everyone on the podcast side of things, it is a very nice graphic with Blue White Illustrated, and it says just $1 for the first week. You can try us out for $1 for the first week, and then you'll get access to read our premium content. You can then join us for a full year and get all of our content for the 2025 season, which is going to be here before you know it. Lots of season preview stuff coming up from me. I was watching Ohio State as best I could. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. And then, of course, tomorrow on the show with me and Greg. Other conversations or more conversations with Drew coming up. I know this was just a slice of what you talked about. What's next for you, whether with Drew or some of the other players that you're writing about and you're giving out to the fans at Blue White Illustrated?
Yeah, the next with Drew is probably the feature story that went into the magazine, which is what happened after the Orange Bowl. How'd that go? It's interesting, right? He and I'm so tempted to just say all of it, but that would ruin it. So right. I'm not going to. But yeah, he processed it interestingly. The coaches processed it interestingly in terms of how they handled him and kind of worked their way through that and what his intentions are coming out of that. So definitely some more interesting stuff from Drew. I got Andy Kotelnicki stuff coming up today, maybe, probably. Definitely has to go into the magazine, so it's going to get written. But his
depends on how long the show lasts.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's all these interesting dynamics to me inside the Lash building when you've got, especially now, a guy like Andy Kotelnicki who is unabashedly wants to become a head coach. That he's trying to become a head coach. There was some stuff last offseason with West Virginia. And again, kind of the best part to me is that all of this stuff intertwines. Drew Allar coming back, his announcement was a week after Andy Kotelnicki report that he kind of took his name out of the hat for West Virginia. They were related. That was important, right? If Andy Kotelnicki's not back for Penn State this season, I don't know if Drew Allar is back.
It's fascinating how much of a razor's edge these things that we view as these locked decisions or these things in time that happened. I'm not trying to get all metaphysical here, but the difference of one thing and the knock-on effects it may have on what 2025 could be if both those players are not here is vastly different. We're having a very different offseason if one of those decisions goes a different way. And of course, read more about it, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, the magazine, get the season preview coming up right now. Nate, you're welcome to stay if you'd like. But
I'm good.
We got to get to Fitz's recruiting update. It's been a couple of weeks since we got one of these here on the show because there's just been so much news and things are flying around. And be honest with you, sometimes when we would record these, they would be out of date by the time I would post them later on the YouTube channel. So here we are. We're going to get to Fitz's recruiting update and looking back at the last week. And of course, looking forward too. Fitz's recruiting update here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Please like the video and subscribe here to the YouTube channel if you haven't done it already. We're going to be talking about what just transpired, get Fitz's perspective on Tyson Harley and Marlon Bright, the last players to commit in the class of 2026. If you want to get those videos individually, I talked about that with Ryan Snyder this weekend in our committed video series. You can get that conversation, but Fitz has a unique perspective. We want to get those from him today here on the show. And of course, then we're going to be looking ahead at 2027 because as most of 2026 is wrapped up, there's still plenty of time to go. The stories aren't over, but the bulk of the class, the hay's in the barn. So now the best thing to do, and what Fitz has done over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, was an early preview of 2027 and where that stands for a couple of different positions. We're getting to all of that here. So Fitz, let's talk about Tyson Harley, defensive end committed from Gonzaga. I know you wrote a couple times about this. So what do you think? What do you think about Harley, his fit, and his projection to Penn State?
Yeah, I think he's a high level ceiling guy. You look at the athleticism, you look at sort of the body type, and the comparison internally. And I wrote this yesterday on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The comparison internally is like Arnold Ebiketie in terms of what he brings to the table. Arnold on the shorter side, 6'2". Harley's a little bit taller than that, but he had those 34 and a quarter arms, I believe it was, at the NFL Combine a couple of years ago. So that's really something that kind of makes him a 6'4", 6'5" type guy. And Harley's the same type of way. I've seen anywhere, I think 33 and a half to 34 and a quarter is what I've seen on him. So hopefully get some more, laser measurements, if you will. But Harley's got that kind of length and it shows up on tape and you can see him. I mean, he's got plenty of room to fill out. He's going to play around 250 pounds at some point. You compare him, or excuse me, you pair him with Jackson Ford and it's a pretty good edge class. I mean, unfortunately they're going to be judged on the top guys there, the Luke Wafels and the Carter Meadows and those guys who went elsewhere. But it's still a pretty good haul for Penn State. And yeah, I think we're going to say that a lot this offseason in terms of this class entirely is it's going to be more about the misses than it is about the hits, but you see Harley there. And, unfortunately it's kind of, it's almost like T. Frank, and I think that we've talked about this before. Sometimes it's like the receiver tape of the go route where the guy's running past the receiver and, you throw it downfield and you're just like, what do you get from that? He's got some clips where he's just running around offensive tackles, but there is some engagement. There is some playing the run. He did play linebacker as a sophomore. I went back and watched his sophomore stuff, and it was pretty decent. I mean, I don't think he was a college linebacker. He's not, and get that out of your mind right now. He's not a college linebacker prospect. But you can see some of that spatial awareness, some of the things that he does with his pursuit that have carried over to defensive end. I think he's going to have a really big year this year. Had a productive year last year opposite Meadows. I had 8 sacks and I think 15 tackles for loss, Ryan wrote. So he's a guy that plays in one of the better leagues in the country and has produced at a couple of different positions. So good pickup for Penn State, and really continues to go into this newfangled look at defensive ends that Penn State has had. When John Scott was here, it was 6'4" to 6'6" in length and all that kind of stuff. And those guys usually take 3 years, and maybe they'll develop, maybe they won't. There was a line, a line there where Penn State was struggling with defensive ends, had to go to the portal. That's how they ended up with AK. That's how they ended up with Chop Robinson. Yeah. But now I think they're back on track. And if you look forward at Penn State's roster, defensive end, it's hard not to be overly optimistic about this group. The younger guys, I know Max Granville's hurt, but the younger guys really bring something special to the table. And, it's been a position that's kind of been a hallmark for Penn State. They're going on Abdul was a first rounder this year. Chop was a first rounder 2 years ago. AK, Adisa Isaac, Jason Owe, these guys have all developed, and Deion Barnes has been here for most or all of those guys. So I think that you continue to see the development. When I was interviewing Jackson Ford a couple of weeks ago, it feels like weeks, but it's months ago at Under Armour, New Jersey, he just kept saying the pitch was the proof is in the pudding, and you can see it. Penn State's had some really good defensive ends, and it's been a diverse group. And now you're bringing in guys that are 6'2" to 6'4", and they don't have some of them do have the condor length, but they don't have those
big bodied guys, right?
Yeah,
the wide
fill into that they were looking for, and it's worked out okay. And I'm talking about guys like Deshaun Burnett, who's a true freshman here. Ivan Kamaju has really shown some good things so far. Like those guys, and even some of these guys come in and surprise athletically, like Burnett has. I mean, I did not have Deshaun Burnett as a 4-5 guy. Like kind of thing that you were looking at. So these are the kind of development tools, and these are kind of things that have worked out for Penn State. And again, you're going to keep going back to the misses because, hey, we said it for months. It was a wonderful, wonderful cycle in the region, and Penn State did not come out with the top guys. And at some point, you're going to have to get over that because it's still a really good position room.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. And I think especially a guy like Jackson Ford, and even to a certain degree, Tyson Harley, they're not small from a frame perspective. I feel like Deion Barnes is hitting this really good sweet spot because you mentioned Ivan Kamaju, big body, like wide built guy that I think has good power in his frame.
There's a reason we thought he was going to be a DT is because he's got 34.5-inch arms. He's got 11-inch hands. He's freaking massive in terms of the features. But also, if he can play at 245, 250, I think he's about 250 right now, like, and retain that athleticism, you like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The goal, I always think like the reason you want a big frame is because you naturally carry the weight you need to play a certain position. If you're bulking and adding mass, offensive linemen have to do this no matter what, because no human is 350 pounds unless you're intentionally trying to get to that big. Like 1 in a million are. But if you can be 250 naturally or 245 and suddenly you're 250, that's what you're looking for. And I think that, we focus on maybe the Max Granvilles of the world, but even Jalen Harvey is kind of a thicker built guy that has, maybe he's not 6'5", but he has a frame on him to be strong and play the run really well. So I've been very pleased from the analysis standpoint of they're not getting just little guys. They're not getting guys that are undersized speed rushers only. These players have the profile, maybe not to be elite run defenders on the NFL level. Like they're not going to be 275 and be Myles Garrett. But at the same time, Chop Robinson even got credit, I think, this past offseason for playing the run better than the profile of him would have described, because he's so disruptive in the run game for the Miami Dolphins. He was doing that at Penn State. Don't think he really got credit for that. They've got guys that can do similar things with physicality or with athleticism on the roster. Let's talk about Marlon Bright, because Marlon Bright is a part of that offensive line class. A natural 270 right now, 6'6". What did you think of Bright as one of the worst kept secrets of a silent commit to Penn State that's had it in quite some time?
Yeah, I mean, you look at what Marlon Bright, I mean, this is one that we couldn't say it enough. It's just like, hey, he's going to be in the class. You just got to wait. And honestly, I didn't think he would make it that far. Most guys don't make it that far. They set a date and then they're like, okay, well, the point of this happening and the point of this waiting isn't going to be something that, is worth holding out for. But Bright had a date in mind. I believe it was a family function, and he was able to keep up with that. But yeah, you're bringing another big body, and Bright, as you see on the YouTube here, is he's a big dude. He's about 6'6", but fairly narrow. It's going to be interesting to see how he grows, because he's got a big lower half, and then all of a sudden you're going to find him being, I think he's 270 right now. You're going to find him being 310, 315, just because he's a naturally big human being. So it's going to be interesting to watch him continue to grow. Plays at DePaul, which is a wonderful program in terms of fundamentals and things like that. We've seen that with Michael Troutman, his former teammate, who's at Penn State. And yeah, I'm not sure where Marlon Bright fits. Is he a mover as a right tackle type mover, or is he an athletic guy that can play left tackle? You mentioned in your piece that he might be a natural guard. Like, I think that there's a versatility here that definitely helps the room. And if you're looking at picking out this entire 2026 offensive line class at Penn State, yeah, there's a lot of diversity in there in terms of guys that can project anywhere. I mean, I was talking to Cody Belair a couple of weeks ago about Kevin Brown. He's like, man, this guy is a perfect center. And I'm thinking, well, he's probably going to play offensive tackle. So, but I think that, Phil Troutwine has the benefit of the doubt there to find the right spot for these guys, and it'll continue. And it's kind of like we said on the defensive end, you look at the future and I mocked up a 2026 depth chart for the offensive line. And yeah, it might be a rebuilding year, but considering the rebuilds that we've seen in the last decade at Penn State on the offensive line, it ranks pretty highly in terms of what Penn State's going to be able to bring back to the table. Even if you lose, you're definitely losing Shelton, you're definitely losing Dawkins, you're definitely losing Nolan Rucci, and then there's a couple other guys that'll have decisions to make. And even if those decisions don't go your way, you still have some good things to work with in that offensive line. So, and again, they've got time to do it, which is really a luxury that Penn State hasn't had for a long time. So it's going to be fun to watch guys like Bright grow into a certain position, because if 5 years ago, he's like a bona fide tackle for Penn State. Now he's a versatile piece that you could kind of put into a couple different positions, which is a great thing. It's a great thing to see how that has grown.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Is like his position fit within this class versus the roster is entirely different, because Penn State has so many tackles on the roster that have that length and that athleticism that you can decide if you want to have an elite guard. And that's really because of his flexibility, and athleticism means too many things to have it narrowed down. There's a different aspects of athleticism, and Bright has a really great mix of them to be a very good guard, like an elite level guard with his size and his growth potential and his ability to win leverage despite that. So there's a lot of good things there on film as well. And of course, that's all going to take time to figure out how all of that fits anyway. So let's now transition.
Frank, before we get too far, you said something a little bit earlier that got the mind running here, and that's a dangerous thing. But you were talking about body makeup on the defensive end. You can see it on both sides of the line of scrimmage, but you're talking about situations where you have these guys and you bring them in and you get them in they call it the bod pod, where they, measure lean mass and they measure body fat and all that kind of stuff that I would never want to step into this machine for my psyche, at least. But you measure that and you see basically how naturally big someone is and how naturally they can handle the weight. So that class that came in 2023 with, I believe the early enrollees were Alex Burkmeyer, Javen Williams, and Anthony Donka. Burkmeyer and Javen Williams, very, very highly rated. Donka, pretty highly rated as well, just not up with the other two. But they put him in the bod pod, and you come away and you look at the numbers, and those two highly rated guys had a ways to go to get to where their body mass was going to be functional for playing in the Big Ten, for playing at Penn State. Donka's was, I think his lean mass was about 30 pounds more than both of those guys. And they were all the same-ish size.
Yeah.
So that tells me that you've got a natural body structure that is so much more ready to go. And who was the first one that ended up playing out of that group was Anthony Donka. Well, you've got guys that sort of resemble that, like Yvonne Kamaju versus, Chaz Coleman. I think the world of Chaz Coleman. I think Chaz Coleman is going to be a really good player here, but he's just got so much further to go from a body standpoint thing. And then you throw the football on top of it because he's fairly raw in that aspect as well. But it's interesting to look at that. And those are the numbers we're not going to have when they're recruits and things like that. But those are the numbers that kind of make the difference when you're talking about bringing these guys in and hoping for maybe more early returns. And Javen can still be a good player. Burkmeyer can still be a good player. But Donka, you're looking at that frame. You're looking at that body structure and thinking, this guy can eventually be a first-round pick based on what we know about some of the guys that have come through the program, like Olu in years past. So I think it's an interesting point to look at body makeup because, hey, who said it in the chat? Steven said it, Steven Light said it in the chat. Watching these high school tapes is where you can see the Division I guys looking like Godzilla. Yeah, and guess what? There's guys out there that look like Godzilla that are not going to play in college because they don't have the agility that comes with it, the actual legitimate body type to make it work. And it's just fascinating to see how these guys will grow over the next couple of years. And that's why it's such a crapshoot. And I think we're getting a little better at it, but still schools are going to miss what you're going to bring in 5 offensive linemen, 2 of 5 hit. That's good. 3 of 5 hit. That's great. But you're never going to be great, truly great with evaluating offensive linemen. And that extends to the pros as well. Like there's been a lot of, a lot of pro. I mean, I'm sure we got Giants fans here. I mean, there's been a lot of pro busts at that position or those positions because of things like that.
So, I mean, there's 2 aspects of it. The sports science, and the more money we pour into it, the better we're going to get at it. And there's a lot of money to be made. So there's a lot of investment into sports science, right, especially when it comes to football, but all sports in general as it becomes more and more business oriented on the highest levels. And then on the other side of it, these are human beings. So like the bust rate is not just about physical potential. It's about the personal development of those individuals. And sometimes for no fault of their own, just certain things don't work the way you think they're going to. And certain personalities don't work the way you think they're going to. And, you know, that's part of this. That's part of human nature. So it's a volatile business of trying to look into the future and predict anything with, you know, what you would think of as like 90% certainty. I think if you get into the range of what you said, like you get to a good strike ratio, that's what you're looking for when it comes to this.
Yeah. And we're far removed from, you know, Joe Allar, those guys. And that's way before your time. That's before I started covering recruiting, is these giant guys that can fall on top of people. And sometimes, I mean, we're still looking at guys that are just massively bigger and stronger than everybody else. And that's going to level off at some point. Like you're going to find competition that catches up to you and then passes you because of the athletic ability. And we're seeing that. But I think we are trying to sort of weed those out more and more. It's why rankings from even 10 years ago are sort of, you know, archaic right now. So you're looking at different things like that. And I'm not saying rankings are perfect, far from it. We at On3/Rivals are looking to be better at that every year. And I think that there have been strides made, but it's never going to be a perfect situation. It's not going to be a perfect situation for the guys that make more money to do it in college and the pros.
So we're running up here against the clock, but I do want to get to the 2027 preview, which we talked about at the beginning of the segment. So what did you look at when it came to the 2027 class and your initial peering towards the next recruiting cycle, given Penn State already has 3 players committed so far in this particular cycle?
Yeah, you look at what's out there right now. Penn State's got commitments from Keemon Spell, who's I think the best running back in the country in the 2027. Khalil Taylor, who's up there among receivers, and then Leighton Von Brandt from Delaware at offensive tackle. So a really good start to 2027. I'm very curious of the speed of this cycle. You have a question here in the rundown that says, would you expect more to come before the start of the season? I really don't. Number one, because that July window is now closed, and that was when you saw Spell commit last year. You saw some movement from these guys that were looking ahead. There was also the camps where you could come in and work those guys out and have the lash bash and all that kind of stuff. So I think that taking that element out of it sort of slows down for a couple of kids. It's not going to change everything, but you're looking at the changing recruiting calendar as something that matters. But at the same time, you're also looking at this 2027 class, watching the 2026 class and seeing how things played out. And that to me is the worrisome thing if you're Penn State, because Penn State had 20 commits or so going into the official visit season. Now they have 25. So not the overly productive official visit season. And I think that we don't need to rehash as to why that was the case. Yeah. You're looking at a situation where I'm not sure how fast the 2027 group is going to move. Now, having said that, quarterbacks are always an anomaly in everything. Just beyond recruiting and everything. So if dominoes do start to move, then you see what happens with Peter Bork, with Keegan Croucher, some of these guys on the target list. The one that I'm looking at right now, Peyton Houston, not for Penn State's purposes, but he picked up a pick from Steve Wilfong to go to USC. He's a quarterback from Louisiana. He's one of 5 quarterbacks that Penn State has offered. Brady Edmonds is one of those. He's committed to Ohio State. Peyton Houston, if he does commit to USC, maybe that gets some things churning for guys like Bork. And is it Teddy Gerard from Georgia is the other one as well. So you've got maybe some movement in quarterback. I talked to Peter Bork at Under Armour. He said he would maybe like to have a decision before the season, but it's gonna be one of those things where I think it's kind of forced into a decision because of dominoes and because of how quarterbacks work with that. So I think that's the only place to look at for 2027. Otherwise, just get ready for the season. I do think taking the window out in July is a good thing for everybody, because it was just another week of hectic things before you get into camp, and now you can fully focus on camp. And by the way, Penn State's got a top 5 team coming back, so you want them to focus on that all that they can. Again, just the juxtaposition of the on-field stuff and the off-field stuff not aligning. It's tough to compute up here. So I'm just kind of rambling on that. So 2027, we started a series in terms of names to know. And hey, Penn State would like to get a lot of its quote unquote shopping done before official visit season. They did it this year. I would expect them to do the same next year and sort of try to avoid what happened in June and early July this cycle. So we're going to see what happens. And that's a roundabout way of saying, check out the site, because we're going to be outlining 2027 guys and, who could jump on board, who could be at the top of the list, and who will definitely be evaluated throughout this, their junior season.
Okay, let's get on to our 2025. Sorry, we were talking about 2027. It's the 2026 recruiting class, but it's actually 2025. Today is July 8th, 2025. So I need to now put myself back into this particular time and talk about the season preview, which we discussed here on the show. And Fitz, you did such a great job getting us out of the last segment, so I just let that be the outro of that. We're bringing back Nate Bauer to talk about the season and the season preview. I want to start with this mailbag question, because we're going to just kind of crunch these two segments into one. And this was, I think, a good question that spans the gap. So, Doug, string of numbers, wants to know, is the way September is set up, 3 warm-up games and a bye before Oregon, beneficial or detrimental to Penn State? They can get reps for young guys, but they won't be battle-tested. They haven't put on their armor before their biggest home game. So, Nate, I want to come to you with this first, because, we haven't talked to you in a couple minutes. This is a rest versus rust conversation while they're also playing football games. So I guess, how do you view September setting up for Penn State and the showdown in the final weekend in the whiteout against Oregon?
Yeah, I think that there are other, there are more ideal ways, certainly, for the schedule to have shaped up, right? Oregon as the first Big Ten game at home is a win for Penn State, but would it be better for Penn State if it was the second? Sure. right. I mean, I guess my issue is what's the timing where the counter argument makes is better, right? If Penn State plays Alabama in week 2, is that any different? Is that a better scenario for Penn State to be prepared for Oregon?
I want to thread the needle here a little bit and give because I agree. I think it's the perfect setup of you get to practice without and get games on your record without having to do any serious lifting. Oregon plays Northwestern. So playing a Big Ten team before you play the Big Ten team, I think, is the only other conversation you could have as to stretching your muscles a little bit of being tested and having to flex. And Fitz, is that more of a fan feels better about that, or does the team gain confidence from beating a Big Ten team? I know I'm asking you to kind of project on these guys, but is there a psychological benefit to getting a Big Ten win before having to face one of your biggest games of the year?
Yeah, I think so, because you're going full bore into the top of the Big Ten in Oregon. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State at the top of the Big Ten this year. So you're going full bore into that. So it's a nice little ramp up. And I mean, no disrespect intended to the Penn State's out of conference opponents, but Penn State's favored heavily in all those 3 games for a reason. They're better than them. So I think that, yes, the biggest thing is staying healthy, and that is wonderful. Absolutely has to be paramount. But also it would be if Penn State were playing Northwestern in week 2. I don't think that changes all that much. So it's one of those things where doesn't hurt, could help, but it doesn't change the math in terms of what you're looking at there. So I think that's where I would go with that. I think it's you'd love to have a ramp way into that, and it's great they have a bye week going into it. I think it's great that they have a bye week going into it. We get to write those records and write those stories about James Franklin's records coming off a bye. But you want your full deck. I mean, this is really dumb because there's a risk every time you put on pads that somebody's going to get hurt. I mean, you
practice.
Rappleyea got hurt in practice last year. Cam Wallace got hurt against Kent State last year. The injuries happen against bad teams too. And that's not without remarking on. But I think statistically, you're probably more likely if you're Oregon to be injured against Northwestern than you are against Villanova if you're Penn State. That's kind of what I'm looking at. So I don't know, and I see what Steven says. They don't have to show much.
So I wanted to follow up with that question and this is just your preference thing, because they don't have to show much. But Andy Kotelnicki has talked about throwing everything on tape so that Oregon has to prepare for everything.
Yeah.
And I guess what's your approach? Because, I think that's a debate as to the best possible course of action. winning the game validates whichever one you take. But I guess from your perspective, what you've seen, is it better to have something, hold more back, or do you want to put everything on film and practice all of it before you get to Oregon?
Yeah, this is where the fan and the coach very different, very discreetly. I mean, you're looking at putting too much on tape. Honestly, I think that's kind of Andy's thing, is like put too much on tape. That way you don't have to worry about it. And then you've got the in-game thread with what the hell are they doing trying to throw a double reverse pass against Villanova? Like this is, and Villanova's catching several strays, and I apologize, great school. But you're looking at a situation where I think they may try to do too much for a reason, and Penn State fans are absolutely going to hate it. I mean, it's going to be such a fun clash of styles, and that's why we got the bye week to talk about it. I can't wait.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think that's something you get into. The good thing here is that it's always good to tackle live. Like, you've seen those issues that schools have had, and hey, Texas, when they play Ohio State, both teams are going to have issues tackling because they're coming straight out of camp where they're doing a lot of thud. They're doing a lot of things where you kind of have to dial back the physicality, and then all of a sudden, Texas and Ohio State's running backs are much faster than you're used to tracking, and they're more physical. They hit back. They stiff arm you back. And I think that that's something that you're going to have to work with. And I think that does benefit Penn State in terms of seeing live bullets flying against a program that you don't know what they're going to run. You have an idea of the framework of their offense, but you don't know what play they're calling. And that makes a difference.
Nate, I want to ask you a kind of a big picture question about a different part of the schedule. So we're just kind of bouncing around in July until we get into some of the camp battles for Penn State later in the summer, once we really get close to camp. But Indiana, I think, is an interesting one on the schedule, because watch out for Indiana is something that gets thrown into the chat or on the message board frequently. Can Indiana, not a mixed metaphor, but you got one there, Corrigan family. Can Indiana sustain its success from 2025 and contend for another college football playoff spot? Are they a threat in November? It feels institutionally that might be difficult, but I know that that coaching staff is very good. How do you view how curious are you about the early indicators for that on watching Indiana during the season? Did I ask a question?
I think I need you to rephrase. Are they going to be good? Is that what
do you think it's possible for them to sustain and maintain their level of play from last season? Or do you think that was also a function of a soft Big Ten schedule? I guess people are saying Indiana in November is a test for Penn State. What are you betting on? That they're going to be better or worse than last year, and we'll know before we get there?
I think they have some really good players, and I think that anytime you have some really good players, it's a wild card. It's not about the breadth of that talent. I don't think that Indiana is positioned well to be, honestly, the way that Penn State is in terms of its depth, in terms of being able to go from one to the next without issue. But at the same time, I literally just ran through PFF's top 50 players in college football. Guess who's in there? Right? Indiana has a couple of guys, a couple of wide receivers that are on that list, and I think a cornerback too. So if you have that high end of talent, I sure it could they still be good from last year to this year? Yeah, sure. Why not? I don't. If Kurt Cignetti has the respect of winning previously, I don't think that there's any argument. They did have a soft schedule last year, for sure. And that got exposed, I think, in the playoff to a certain extent. And it got exposed certainly against Ohio State, but Ohio State was really, really good last year. So what's the answer here? Probably somewhere in the middle, where this is a team, but the notion of Indiana going back to the Indiana of what everyone thinks, stereotypical Indiana, 4-8 Indiana. Yeah. No, I don't think they're going to be 4-8.
They have an interesting stretch here. September 20th, Illinois, then at Iowa the next week, and then Oregon October 11th before having Michigan State at homecoming. So they do not have the same schedule they had last year. There is a lot more meat on the bone here. So I think that's will be a good indicator of how that showdown is going to go. Fitz, any thoughts on that? And just generally, I asked Nate this last week. What are your thoughts about the upcoming season from kind of the broad sense of looking at the teams, looking at the schedule, anything that I haven't asked that we should have so far in this particular segment?
No, I just texted my buddy Zach Osterman of the Indy Star what Indiana's record's going to be this year, and he said 15-0. So we got that going for us. Zach's a funny guy. But nothing really to add on that. I mean, it's going to be a well-coached team. I think Indiana, you're going to see a lot of this kind of every year is how do they build in the portal and what did they find in the portal that no one else has? And they did a really good job with that last year. Granted, a lot of those guys came over from JMU, but at the same time, like that's going to have to be that. And I don't think that's a recipe for sustained success, but yeah, they made the playoff last year. It was pretty good for them.
Yeah. I had somebody said Nebraska is going to be the third toughest game. I think it was, who said that? Yeah, it was Ryan. Ryan said Nebraska is going to be the third toughest game on the schedule. I think Nebraska is super volatile. You live by the portal, you die by the portal. And that is currently where they are as a team. I think that's fascinating. That's going to be, I agree with Ryan as far as, we're going to talk about Ohio State this week on the BWI Live Show coming up tomorrow. And then I think the next team we're going to do is Nebraska because there's some talent. They've gotten some high-ranked talent. Who knows if it's going to work out at Nebraska. And the transfer portal, I was just taking an early look at some of that stuff. Super interesting in terms of the number of players in and out over the last couple of years. So that's going to do it for today's show, and that's what's coming up tomorrow. Fitz, what's coming up from you this week? Actually, you're texting, so I'll go.
That's fine. It's just Zach. He's like, let me come on live. We can talk about Indiana. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that to our listeners. Or well, I mean, anyway. What's coming up for me? More of the 2027 stuff moving forward. More magazine stuff. But it's ramping up to. I mean, the end of the month is when they start camp, and it's about 20 days now. So really excited to get rolling with some football, and really excited to bring you all that coverage.
Nate, how can people sign up for the magazine so they can get that season preview? And, of course, if they're interested, get the print version of the magazine. And just a spoiler, bluewhiteonline.com if you need that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say our Twitter feed has a few links in there as well if you're a Twitter follower of Blue White Illustrated. But sure, yeah, bluewhiteonline.com has a bunch of stuff. And I think there's actually a special for pre-orders that if you get in there, it's maybe 50% off and free shipping. I don't have it right in front of me, so don't quote me on that. But I will say this, Matt Erb, who puts together that magazine, has always done an outstanding job. I think it's some of the best stuff that we do all year, and it is absolutely worth checking out. I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I mean, the story I wrote about Drew is like a banger. It's really good.
You know what I found, Nate? Every time I write a story and I'm like, I think I did a really good job on that one, there's always like a fight in the Blue White Illustrated message board thread on that particular article. So I've taken that as a compliment now of like when people get in the thread to argue, that means you've done a good job. And nothing sparks more arguments and conversations than the starting quarterback. So I agree with you. I think I didn't read it, but I know that the quality of your work, you did do a banger, and I can't wait to discuss it with people over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. And when I say argument, I mean like we're sitting at the bar, we're having a drink, we're arguing about it, not necessarily like people are calling each other names or anything like that. So that'll do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow. As always, subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.